The night belongs to us. We will bathe in their blood and relish their screams.
Hi everybody, I'm Mark White. I'm the former project lead and managing director for Southampton Vampire by Night. In this video, I'm looking to discuss the initial project design. So how we designed it, and I want to go into the kind of pitfalls that we went into very quickly at the start of the project, and kind of give you a basic overview of what the project was. I'm going to go basic because what I've done with this one, if you go into the video description, there's going to be a really, we did a project overview document. So what I've done is I've taken the initial part of that document and put it onto the description. So I find that that's going to be better than me just sat here reading it out to you like some kind of PowerPoint presentation or something. So please have a read of that and you'll get a much better overview of the project. You'll also notice in this one that I'm not going to be going into detail with certain things. I'm going to be throwing things at you and then moving on, because the idea is those are all going to be covered in future videos, and more detail and etc. etc. So how was the project initially designed? Well, three of us went down the pub and got pissed. That's how it initially came about. All of us, of course, had been thinking about the project for some time. In previous video, I talked to motivation. During that, of course, we were talking about what changes we'd make, what we'd like to see, and that then, when we got down the pub and we sat around that table and we started to really throw out those ideas and spitball how it would all work and the rest of it, that was a really big kind of moment in the creation of the project. It sounds stupid because we did get pissed. It was good though, and so it was the next day, whilst nursing a hangover, that I put together a document that became the kind of the Bible for the project, which was a breakdown of all the things we discussed and given them more detail. And then in that, I went through it all and I itemised all of the things that we would need to do to then create all of the stuff that we talked about. So it was like basically a big project overview. Then each of those sections had more information, so described what we were going to be doing in a little bit more detail. So yeah, that was the kind of initial phase of it. Now, what came from that meeting was that we were all very keen to make a Larp that could withstand the test of time, that was incredibly inclusive and new player friendly, that was, loads of history in it, that it was easy to run and maintain, that we weren't going to be held ransom by players, that we're going to have a really robust grievance system in there to help with anything that went wrong within the games between players or players and refs or refs and refs or general public. We were going to make it into a proper company so we could have proper insurances on our games. We were going to be looking at hiring out good venues, places like art galleries and gyms and historical locations, etc. We were looking to make this, we were looking to definitely go from that back room of the pub kind of parlour Larp of 10 to 30 players to 50 to 100 players, with long-lasting chronicles. We wanted to go for a sabbatt versus camarilla, with players playing characters. So if you were a sabbatt, you would attend the sabbatt game, and if you're a camarilla, attend the camarilla game. But there would be moments where you could attack and turn up at the other player's game, if you see what I mean. And there's loads and loads to it. We wanted an asset code system that would allow us to track everything in the game, from plots to items to locations. You know, the list goes on. We really did go into detail of what we thought would make an amazing LARP, not just for players, but for the ref team that was having to look after those players. Because one of the things that I came across very quickly is it's very easy to be a player in a LARP. It's very easy to bitch and moan and complain about not getting everything you want and the rest of it. But sometimes it can be incredibly hard to be a ref or a game organizer. And the more things you put into a game to make your players happy, the harder it is to maintain that for your ref team, and the quicker they will get burnout and leave. So we were looking to make sure that the players were getting maximum engagement, but the ref team was able to do minimum effort to give you that engagement. So there was a lot of work taking place up front to then make the games themselves really easy to run and comfortable. We were having a system we were putting in for hats, basically. So you would be, when you took a role on, you would be assigned a hat for that role, and it would come with how many hours of work would be expected of you if you were to do that role. So everything was clear and upfront, so there was no surprises, and people could easily work out if their lifestyle would be able to, you know, accommodate that amount of extra work. We were looking at budgets, so we know that there's a massive divide or difference in players. I've always called it the scale of like loads of time but you know, no money, or little money, and then loads of money but no time, and trying to get the right balance on that meter to allow as many players as possible to attend your game is very important. So it was fundamental for us to kind of ensure that the game was accessible as possible for everybody. So we were looking at things like to make the game a sandbox game for players, meaning that they could play and interact with the world that we created for them, but meaning that our NPC crew felt like player characters. It was at a friend's game. I shouldn't be using names actually, but I don't think he'll mind on this one. A gentleman named Mike Diamond and Pat, sorry Pat, I've forgotten your last name. They created a game called Cold Horizon, and in Cold Horizon it was the first time I ever experienced this, where an NPC was actually felt and was designed to feel like a player character, but they had flaws or limitations, and sometimes they would be directed to do certain things, but most of the time you just played a character. And it was incredibly fun to play at those games, and I think it meant that the interactions I was having with players was a lot of fun as well. And so I took that and went, do you know, that's one of the best uses of NPCs I've ever seen, and wanted to make sure that was implemented into our game as well. And also because of that, what Mike and Pat had done is they'd offered a reduced ticket price or free ticket price, I think it was even free, to the NPCs to come along and do that. And so it allowed people with restricted budgets to actually attend. And, you know, little things like that I just went, do you know what, that's brilliant, because that kind of allows us as well to then cater for all budgets, because we can allow players that don't have that kind of budget to come along an NPC for us, but in theory still play a player character, still be part of the game and enjoy the game, only with a couple of things during the game that they'd have to do. And yeah, so that was fundamental. We wanted that in there. And yeah, so sorry for name dropping you guys. I'm going to try not to name drop anybody during these videos, but I feel like you guys deserve it, because when I was saying in the motivational video about legacies, you guys made a legacy. That was a fantastic LARP system, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself during the time it ran. So Hopefully everybody who's watching this will now know of Cold Horizon as well, but it was really good and very motivational. So Cold Horizon. So anyway, the project as itself, we were looking at lots and lots of different things, because it was key that we weren't going to fall into the same mistakes that we'd seen other LARPs make, because of things like, as I say, players having way more control over a game than they should, refs getting burnout, when people leave, loads of information, like meta plot information goes with them and stuff like that, and generally just trying to modernize, or make the game modern, if you see what I mean. Because we noticed there was a massive difference between the older players that were playing UKM and the new younger players that were coming in. There was a lot of difference in what motivated them at the game, and also their interactions with other players and how they dealt with player versus player. And one of the issues that I think UKM faced was there was nothing really in place to deal with the bleed that can come from PvP, and we wanted to make sure we had something in place to help deal with that. So players and ref had a system to follow, to deal with situations that can come out of players that are very invested in their characters that then get killed, harmed, or manipulated by other players. And then we were kind of taken a little bit from Nordic LARP in that regard, that more of a consent-ish based system, not as consent based as Nordic LARP is, but there was a level of consent in some of the players. But anyway, this would be something I talk about later. So as I say, we were going into it, and it was really cool, and I got that project document made. It took me a little bit longer than the day with the hangover to complete it, but eventually when it was done, we sat round again, we looked at it, and then basically that's where a lot of issues started. So bit of advice at this stage: if you are making a project and you're the project lead, it's your baby, make sure that you have the time to do everything by yourself, and make sure you've got the ability to do everything by yourself, because you may find there may come a time during your project when that's exactly what's happening, and you have to make a decision if you can continue it or not. Now, to say that there was elements of this project that I was unable to complete is very true. There are certain parts that I just couldn't make, and unfortunately some of them were very fundamental for the actual completion of this project, and some of them that basically what ended up happening was, along the way, things had to be cut from the project, and then you get this ripple effect. So when you cut an element from a project that's been linked to other elements in the project, that ripple of changes those other elements as well. So now you've got to spend your time going back through other elements you've created to adjust to this change that you've made. And it can be just as time consuming doing that as creating them in the first place. And so if you've got elements that are critical and you're unable to do it, and the person you were relying on to do it isn't able to, well, welcome to some ripples. And in my case, those ripples were waves at times. So my biggest advice would be, if you're project planning, is make sure you can do it all yourself and you've got the time to do it, or ensure that you know someone who's a professional that you can pay and have a guarantee of completed work. It's very critical that you remember that. You can have 1,000,001 fantastic ideas, and some of them will make you You'll be desperate to make sure that they're implemented. But if you can't do it, there's no guarantee they will. So yeah, that's important. That was one of the things that crippled this project from the very start. Was after that meeting, there were some elements in there that I was unable to do that then became core to the project and then had to be removed at a later date. And the ripples, and I say waves, that was created from that set me back so far. And if you are creating a project, really look into what you consider to be core. So these are the fundamental things that have to be in this for it to work. Focus on them, get them done. Then look at the kind of the bolt-ons, the things that are going to add extra cool factors, elements, the niceties, all that. Well, correct me, no, not the niceties. These bolt-ons, these are the things that will make your game more robust, bulkier. Think of it like downloadable content for actual mission packs or something for a game. And then around the outside of that, the niceties, the things that are just, in theory, the cosmetics that you find in computer games. They don't add anything other than they make things look nicer. So when it comes to your project, get that core done. Work on the core only. Don't worry about making the mistakes I did by going out and making YouTube channels and company logos and t-shirts and you name it. There was loads of stuff I worked on. It wasn't core, and it was like I was going between the core, the nuts and the bolts and the niceties continuously. And then of course, when you have a big change in your project, guess what? Lots of that has to be redone and changed. But if you just focused on the core first, if there was a big change, it's not going to affect too much, because it's those bolt-ons and stuff you'll find that get affected most from the changes. So yeah, there's that. And I would say that some of the things that really did hit the project hard was we ended up losing international, the general public side of it. We lost the asset code database, and we had the rule system change on us three times. So things like that throughout the project, plus budgeting, plus other things that came about, are the ripples or waves that hit us, because they hit an awful lot of elements. So yeah, if you're project planning, make sure you can do it yourself. And when I said time allocation is important in regards to, and I said this in motivation, you're not beholden to anybody unless you've set a deadline and people are giving you money to hit that deadline. You don't have to worry about it. It takes as long as it takes. Don't feel pressured to do it. We originally planned to have this project launch when Bloodlines 2 came out. It's the reason, one of the other reasons we started, because we thought, brilliant, we can catch on to the coattails of Bloodlines 2, and all the advertisement that'd be going on around that, and all the people that'd be super keen to play Vampire, and that's a great time to start a LARP. And then, of course, Bloodlines 2 got cancelled, and we carried on making this, but the deadline had gone by that point. So yeah, the only person that you're kind of beholden to when you do these kind of things is yourself. So it was something I wish I could go back and slap myself in the face and say, come on, I felt like I had to deliver this in like a year, 2 years of it being announced, kind of thing, and all of that kind of rubbish. I could still be I could have still been making it now. You know what I mean? Who's to say? I mean, trust me, I haven't been for the last 3 years. I have not looked at this for multiple reasons. But yeah, so time scales and stuff like that, when you are setting them to yourself, don't be rigid to them unless you have to be. But give yourself some flexibility, because trust me, during this project that you may be going off on now, there's going to be some changes along the way. It's not going to be the same thing that you initially set out with. All your best intentions, all of your, you know, your planning and all the rest of it, trust me, there's something going to come along that's going to trip you up a bit and going to affect your timescales. So just kind of remember that, you know what I mean? And I think that kind of covers it. I mean, as I say, in the description of this video is a much better description of everything that we kind of discussed at that kind of piss up. And in future videos, I am going to be covering in way more detail the elements that made up this project, why we did them, and all of that. It's all going to be covered. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. Hopefully I haven't rambled too much. Yeah, please put some comments on the video, because I want that engagement with you. I hate talking to myself, so put something in the comments for me to engage with you with, and trust me, I will. And yeah, and thank you all for watching this. And if you're still here now, wow, really thank you very much for watching this far into the video. So I love you all, and see you later. Bye.